Hey everybody, today we've got a 2020 Hyundai Palisade, which is Hyundai's new entry into the super competitive three-row mid-size family SUV segment. Now, Hyundai has offered three-row SUVs in the past in the Veracruz and the Santa Fe XL, for which the Palisade serves as the replacement. But neither of those vehicles really hit the nail on the head the way the Palisade seems to have. It's a really competitive offering. It's got a lot of good features. Like most Hyundai products, more than anything though, this thing is about value. And it offers a ton of stuff for a very, very reasonable price tag. Starting on the outside here, and the Palisade kind of has a love it or hate it look. This thing shares most of its components, including its platform, all of its electronics, all of the stuff beneath the surface that you don't see with the new Kia Telluride. And I have to think that most people would agree that side by side, the Telluride is a much more attractive design than the Palisade. It's like Hyundai almost deliberately made the Palisade a little less striking, if you will, than the Telluride. It's not to call it ugly, it just isn't as cohesive of a design as the Telluride, which I think is the vehicle that most buyers will probably cross-shop this with, at least to start. Anyway, though, it's not ugly. Up front, you get this big grille with a brushed aluminum style frame. You can see that the headlights include this reflective element that transitions down into this lower lighting area here, and then there's a lower grille at the chin there that includes the standard radar cruise control sensor. Moving around to the side, and this is a limited model. It's fully loaded and it is riding on 20-inch wheels. Those brushed aluminum accents continue down the greenhouse. They're on the bottom near the kick plates down there, and they are also in the roof rails. Moving around to the back, and that kind of wraparound design from the headlights carries over into the taillights. Single exhaust on this thing, two tips, but you know what I mean. Anyway, it says Palisade across the back. I think that's a nice touch. And that's about it. Moving on to the rear cargo area, and I'll pop the power rear liftgate here. And you'll see that there's a fair amount of space back here. The Palisade seats 7 in this configuration, but lesser trims come with a second row bench seat that increases seating capacity to 8. And I think that's notable. Three-row SUVs, three-row family SUVs are generally cross-shop pretty heavily. It's a really competitive segment, as I mentioned before. But one thing that differentiates them is that some seat 7, some seat a maximum of 7, while others seat a maximum of 8. And that's usually based on whether the third row seats 2 or 3. And worth mentioning here is that the Palisade seats 3 across in the third row, allowing for a maximum seating capacity of 8. Anyway, that third row is power operated, at least on this trim level, and I've left one seat down to give you an idea of how much space there is back here with the third row folded, and then I've left one seat up to give you an idea of how much space there is behind the third row when it's extended. And there's a fair amount of room. I think you can, for most needs, you can just leave the third row up. And then there's a storage compartment underneath the rear load floor here with a fair amount of space. While this vehicle doesn't have it, clearly you can get this thing with a rear cargo cover. You can see it would fit across there and seat right there. And this storage cubby actually includes a space where you can store that rear cargo cover, which is very clever since, especially when you have the third row up, there's really no use for it, so you just stash it down here when you don't need it. There's a 12-volt outlet back here. Like I mentioned, power operated third row, and other than that, there's not much. There is a USB port for each of your third row passengers, which is a nice touch. That'll help keep iPads, and other devices fully charged, especially on long road trips. Close the tailgate via this button right here. And now we'll move on to the interior. Okay, now that we're on the inside, and I've actually rotated the vehicle a bit just to keep the sun from being directly in the shot here. And it's a pretty nice interior. Obviously, this is considered a mainstream car, but it's got a lot of high-end luxury touches. Starting on the door panel here, this is a soft touch material. This is a kind of piano black style finish with a slight metallic pattern. It almost looks like denim once you get past the gloss finish there. Below that is this quilted leather. Below that further is this, it's almost imitation leather. I'm not sure if it's leather or imitation actually. There is a nice kind of diamond pattern on this aluminum look finish. And then a nice Hyundai touch is that these window controls and mirror adjustment controls are finished in this kind of brushed aluminum look as well. Moving on, here are some controls for the active safety features to the left of the steering wheel here. And then one feature that I really don't like in this thing is that the electronic parking brake is released over here. In most modern vehicles, parking brake controls are around the gear shift controls, which we'll get to in a second. But in this thing, they're still over on the left here, and they don't function intuitively. There I just turned the parking brake on, and then pressing it down turns it off. And that's not intuitive, not to mention the fact that it's used from the left rather than up and down. It's just not an intuitive design, but they can't all be winners. Anyway, I think we'll turn her on now. So first you'll notice this massive digital gauge cluster here. So no needles, no mechanical parts to this thing. It's just one big screen. You've got your speedometer on the left, tachometer on the right, temperature gauge on the bottom right corner there, and then on the left side, bottom right corner is your fuel gauge. And you've also got some good information that'll come up in the middle there. As for the steering wheel, pretty basic Hyundai. This is, like I mentioned, top of the line limited trim, so it's leather wrapped. You get paddle shifters, and pretty much everything else you'd expect on a steering wheel there. Moving on, more of that aluminum finish carries over to the center stack here. So this section controls this massive and super high resolution center infotainment screen here. This is a joy to use. It's really clear, it's sharp. I was in a $110,000 Lexus LS last week, and its infotainment screen was what felt like decades behind the screen in this vehicle. So I think a lot of times technology and software is ignored when it comes to evaluating like the level of luxury you get with a vehicle. Just because you're spending a lot for a luxury vehicle doesn't mean you're going to get a good infotainment experience. And the opposite is quite true with this vehicle, which I mentioned is very reasonably priced and offers just a killer infotainment setup that is pretty much leading the way when it comes to resolution and ease of use and interfaces and so forth. This is a touchscreen, but it's also got a lot of buttons below here, which is nice. It's good to see redundancy between touch functionality and physical buttons, so this makes it pretty easy to use. You've got map, navigation, radio, media, seek, track, favorites, and setup, and then a tuning knob and a volume knob here that you also press to turn the system on and off. Just below that, you've got your HVAC controls. Again, intuitive, simple to use. Below that are your, we'll call them vehicle controls. Here's how you use the automatic transmission. There's no gear lever, and in my eyes, unless a vehicle has a manual transmission, there's absolutely no reason for it to have a physical gear lever here in 2020. So I think this setup really cleans up the cockpit and opens up a lot of space here. Over here, you've got some different driving modes. You've got comfort, sport, smart, and you'll notice that they change as I rotate this dial. Here, we'll go back to sport. They turn red. Go to comfort, it changes back to blue. Go to eco, it turns green. And then snow, you get this snow icon here. And here we'll turn it back from eco to snow. It's more or less blue and white. But anyway, you've also got a locking center differential that effectively locks the vehicle into all-wheel drive. So if you're driving through dirt or snow and you know you're going to want the vehicle to be sending power to all four wheels, you can pop that center lock button on. Whereas without it, the vehicle would send power to the rear wheels only once it recognized that it needed to, if that makes sense. Moving on, hill descent control, parking sensor control, the start stop on off button, and then this really nice surround view monitor. Again, super high resolution, which we'll see if we can get it to turn on here. Put it into reverse. There's the backup camera. You've also got all these different angles here. Really high resolution setup. It's sharp. It's easy to read things. You can actually read the license plate on the vehicle behind you. And again, not to knock on Toyota and Lexus, but the $110,000 Lexus LS I had last week, super low resolution camera. This thing just blows it out of the water and really shows you just how much value Hyundai gives you with each of their products. Some different angles here, top down, sides. This allows you to change the brightness and resolution. There's another cool feature on this thing. We'll see if we can get it to do it. When you turn the turn signal on, there's a little camera on the underside of the side view mirrors that displays this image. On the left side, it puts it in the speedometer circle. When you have the right turn signal on, it puts it in the tachometer circle. This thing also has blind spot monitoring, but this is just another nice little Easter egg feature that you get with the Palisade that just kind of makes day-to-day driving a little bit easier. Moving on here, there's more. This cup holder design is kind of fun. So you can see that there's this collar here that actually slides back and locks in place when you don't need it. And then when you do need it, you just press this button and it pops out and it holds your drink nicely. So if you don't want to use this as a cup holder and you want to put something big here, like, I don't know, a purse, a digital camera, whatever, a little bag, you can do that just by sliding that cup holder back into place. Like I said, limited trim. It has wireless charging. There's a USB port under there. I'd still like to see USB-C in this thing, which is clearly becoming the new standard, but all you get is USB-A. Another little fun feature is this massive storage compartment under here, which is another great place to toss a purse. And there are also two 12-volt outlets located under here as well. Center console box is pretty spacious. There's another 12-volt outlet. This thing is just loaded with outlets and a USB port down there. And there's also this little storage cubby as well. Up top, you've got a simulated suede headliner. It's not actual suede, but it feels like suede and it looks like suede. It shows fingerprints like suede. Sunroof opens nice and wide, and there's also a panoramic glass roof in the back. It doesn't open, but it lets a lot of light in. Speaking of the back, we'll hop in the back seat now. Okay, climbing into the second row here in the Palisade, and we'll probably wind up spending a little more time back here than I normally would, just because there's a lot to go over. So since this is a limited model, it's got second row captain's chairs, which, like I mentioned before, reduces the vehicle's overall seating capacity from 8 down to 7. But that said, the second row is both heated and ventilated, which is not something that you find in many modern vehicles, especially not many modern vehicles costing under $50,000. The second row also gets its own temperature controls, and then down here, yet another 12-volt outlet and 150-watt 3-prong home-style power inverter. So you can plug in, I don't know, a video game system, pretty much anything you want back here. So you'll see I have the screen in place for the second row, so if you have a baby or just about anyone who doesn't want the sun in their eyes, you can extend this screen that conveniently stows in the door panel. This is a pretty common feature in three-row family SUVs today, as they kind of take on the role previously occupied by minivans. It's just a family-friendly feature. Air vents up in the ceiling there, some lights. You have your grab handles, and like I said, the panoramic glass roof here lets in a lot of sunlight. Still some more things to go over here. There are 2 cup holders in the second row door armrest, and then there's a third cup holder here via this kind of water bottle style holder in the bottom of the door panel there. Another clever Hyundai Kia feature are these USB ports located in the front seat backs. Either way, you've got map pockets on either seat, and that about covers it. Armrests for the captain's chairs here. They do slide forward and back, and there's a fair amount of legroom back here. You can see I'm sitting behind where I would have the seat to drive this vehicle. I'm about 5'11", and yeah, fair amount of room. Can't imagine wanting much more. This would actually be a really great place to spend your time on a long road trip. Now that we've covered the second row, we'll climb back into the third row here. And generally in these vehicles, the third row is kind of an afterthought, but that's really not the case here. As you can see, legroom's a little bit cramped. Granted, we'll slide the second row up a little bit. A lot of room. Now that the second row's been moved up, yeah, wow. A lot of space. I can have my whole hand here with some room to spare. And then, like I showed before, there's a USB port, cup holders, speaker back here, ventilation in the ceiling. Yeah, not a bad place to hang out. So I think that about covers the Palisade's interior. So to begin to summarize the Palisade here, this vehicle obviously competes in a really competitive segment. In addition to the Kia Telluride, its competitors are the Toyota Highlander, which is all new for 2020, the Honda Pilot, which is arguably the most minivan-like SUV of all time. You've also got the Ford Explorer, the Subaru Ascent, the Nissan Pathfinder, the Volkswagen Atlas. There's more, the list goes on. So obviously it's got to get a lot of little things right, and it has a third row seat. It offers a power second and third row seat functionality on upper trims. It's got the big sunroof. It's loaded with active safety features. It's got standard Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It's got all those things. It checks all the boxes, and there are a lot of boxes that vehicles need to check in this segment. That said, it's got some real competitive advantages, and I will get into those now. First, by taking a look at the window sticker here. So I've got the sticker printed out on this piece of 8.5 by 11 inch paper. And this thing, when I sat down in it, knowing that it's a Hyundai and knowing that Hyundai Kia products are generally value oriented, my assumption was that it costs somewhere around $53,000 and change. I was off by around $6,000. This thing, as equipped, and it's fully loaded, it's limited trim, it's got the optional all-wheel drive system. It costs $47,605, including destination charges, including everything. So that's pretty incredible. Fully loaded, this thing costs under $48,000, which is a very strong value proposition. In addition, you get Hyundai's kick-ass warranty, 5 years, 60,000 mile bumper to bumper. Keep in mind, most automakers, like just about all of those competitors I mentioned, offer 3 years, 36,000 mile bumper to bumper. And then Hyundai offers a 10-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty. And again, the competitors, for the most part, offer 5 years, 60,000 mile powertrain warranties. So huge advantage there. Additionally, Hyundai crushes it with regard to software, and that's something I alluded to before, using the Lexus LS as an example. Super high-end premium vehicle, but Toyota doesn't do software very well, so as a result, you sit down in this ultra luxury vehicle and you're greeted with low resolution screens, a really poor backup camera, and just an overall frustrating user interface experience. And the Palisade and the rest of the Hyundai and Kia portfolio really flip that on its head. Not only are you getting a ton of vehicle for your money, but you're getting some of the sharpest infotainment screens and some of the most modern software and user interface systems in the industry, period. I've found nothing to criticize about the infotainment setup of this vehicle. It's not a luxury car, but I just think it's funny that luxury automakers can charge as much as twice as much for a vehicle and get away with offering, in a lot of cases, a very, very poor infotainment experience. And this vehicle is the polar opposite of that. It's an impeccable value, and it's just overall extremely modern in just about every way. So I think that's kind of what you're getting with the Palisade. Another advantage is, like I mentioned, not all three-row family SUVs offer seating for 8. The Palisade does, thanks to the fact that it seats 3 across in its third row. A lot of the competitors just seat 2 across in their third row. So you can get second row captain's chairs and still have room for 7, which I know is a big thing for a lot of families. And overall, it's just a really fresh, new design. I think the exterior is a little, I'm excited to drive a Telluride actually, because I know that it offers the same feature content, but a lot of the subjective areas like design are different. So I think that vehicle is also worth getting excited about. But overall, Hyundai Palisade, like most Hyundai products, an incredible value proposition, and it offers a lot for you to get excited about. Even if you're buying this for your kids, I think as the driver, you'll find that it's a very nice, relaxed place to be.